What's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. That's right, we're traveling right along in our daily journey through the nightmares with this count it, eighth Hellraiser film, and this one's called Hellraiser Hellworld. Hellraiser Hellworld is about a group of teenagers obsessed with the Hellraiser video games that get invited to a convention of sorts surrounding the Hellraiser series. But once they get there, they realize that it's much more fact than it is fiction. And that is when Pinhead and the Cenobites start showing up at the party, ready to tear everyone's soul apart. This Hellraiser film is incredibly interesting because as it starts off, it feels very meta. Not unlike New Nightmare or Amityville The Awakening, but I would actually liken this type of meta more so with the Amityville film, because it's a frustrating meta. In Amityville The Awakening, that film focused on a family that moved into the Amityville house in a world that knows about the Amityville horror movies, which is a very cool idea. But they also have characters in the film that are like, huh? What is this Amityville horror movie? Murders happened in this house? What? I'm sorry, but that's completely unrealistic, silly, and crazily missed potential. The meta in Hellraiser Hellworld is just as frustrating, if not more, because it's not really meta. You think it is because these people are wearing Pinhead shirts, they're talking about Cenobites, and they're talking about Pinhead in a very pop culture-esque way, but the movies don't exist in this film. They know the Hellraiser name because of a video game series, which does not exist in our world. So it's weirdly meta, but at the same time, it's not. And I don't know why they had to do this video game thing in the first place. Why couldn't it just be fans of the movie series? Is it too much like Scream or something? I don't know, but it was very frustrating to me. Just imagine people sitting around a TV watching the first Hellraiser film or something, and then they come across the puzzle box. They don't take it very seriously, they laugh it off, and then they play around with it, unleashing the real Pinhead into our dimension. The real Pinhead, by the way, that looks a lot different and a lot more frightening. Again, not unlike New Nightmare with Freddy's new appearance. But that is not what happens in this film. Once these characters get to this Hellworld party, it turns into a fairly typical horror film where people are picked off one by one. It should be interesting enough to note that Henry Cavill was in this film, as was the guy that plays King Ezekiel from The Walking Dead. Which, man, oh man, are they both really hard to recognize here as they are babies. But yeah, plot-wise, I wasn't that enthralled with what was going on, especially being a fair fan of Hellraiser at this point. Because even though the plot here was much more specifically Hellraiser than it has been in the last few movies, it still didn't feel like it. Honestly, there's usually a tone that you find with these films, which, whether Pinhead is at the forefront or the background, that tone doesn't usually change that much. And it was entirely different here. A part of that has to do with the twist of the film here, and I won't spoil that for you, but there's a reason why this film feels a little bit different. And part of that's pretty cool. But another part of that is kind of annoying and illogical. It was clearly trying to fit in with the times, being in the mid-2000s when the Saw series was really at its strongest, so there are things here and there, let's be honest, that seem a little bit too Saw Trap-like, but at least Saw did a good job with its methodology behind picking victims and their individual importance, and you can't say the same about these characters, all of which mostly blend in together and are insanely shallow. In general, I would say the concept was interesting, but it was incomplete. Basically, in terms of how I review films, I would just say that I don't think they 100% got what they sought after. I think the idea is there somewhere embedded in the film, but what came out of it was not great. So let's go ahead and talk about my final score that I did not write. From a technical, unbiased perspective, I would say that this film is fine, but mostly by the books. Everything that happens from the beginning to the end is pretty much what you would expect to see in a average, typical slasher horror film, and not something as specific as Hellraiser has been in the past, at least. The practical effects aren't really there as they have been in the past. Pinhead's relevance isn't as specific as it has been in the past. Some of the writing I did appreciate, especially towards the end, but at the same time, towards the end, I didn't really care so much about the editing. I thought some of the editing started to feel a little bit choppy towards the end, a little bit over the place. So my unbiased score is 58%. My biased score, just kind of how I felt about the film in general, is pretty close to that. Because in general, I didn't hate the film. I enjoyed bits and pieces of it. I like that they tried, at least a little bit, to be meta. I liked some of the casting choices here because it was kind of cool to see Henry Cavill in a very, very early role. Same thing with the guy who plays King Ezekiel. I thought the pacing of the film also worked more or less pretty well, and towards the end of the film, I liked what they did with the story. In general, it's a decent film. It's not Hellraiser material, in my opinion. So this score is just a little bit higher than my unbiased score. So my biased score is 60%, which means that when we combine the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 59%. 59 out of 100%. And I did not look at the stinking letter grade. C-. Guys, are you a fan of the Hellraiser film series? And if so, which one is your favorite? And how do you compare Hellraiser Hellworld to everything else? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the number